Welcome to episode 47 of Posture Labs and Alignment Fundamentals. In this week's episode, we're covering two poses that are related, Ardha Pincha Mayurasana and Pincha Mayurasana. So we have Dolphin pose and forearm stand. Now, the second part of this tutorial is a very challenging pose, so I would definitely recommend using a wall. I'll explain it more as we get there. We'll get started with dolphin pose. It would be a good idea to make sure your shoulders are warm and maybe do a little bit of side bending, back bending. You could do some cat-cows before taking this tutorial or practicing these poses. Dolphin pose, I like to explain this that it's basically down dog on your forearms. So what I see a lot of people do when they hear that is start to interlace their hands like they would in bound headstand, but you actually want your forearms parallel here. What happens a lot of times is people will start with their forearms parallel and the elbows start to splay out and the hands together. We really want to try to avoid that and just keep the forearms parallel. This happens often when people start to take their legs up into forearm balance. There's a few ways you can do this. Some people might like to put a strap around their triceps to keep their elbows from going out. Personally, it's not my favorite. I feel it's a little bit restrictive and it doesn't feel great. It also is quite challenging for me to find the perfect distance with a strap. So what I like to do, it's kind of a weird trick. I like to put my elbows in a little bit too close to one another so the eyes of the elbows are kind of facing up and then push my elbows out. The skin on the backs of my arms and the backs of my elbows kind of locks onto the mat so that I kind of feel locked into this shape and my elbows aren't sliding out anymore. So once again, hands down, put my elbows just a little bit too close to one another and then push the elbows out. So the skin on the back of my elbows locks onto the mat. Now I'm gonna tuck my toes and lift my hips up. Walk my feet forward. I'm basically in dolphin pose here. Now, you're pushing down into your forearms and lifting up through your shoulders. So there's space for your head. Your head should not touch the mat here. You can let it hang heavy. Look back at your feet so your spine is neutral. Can be quite challenging on the hamstrings, so you can always put a gentle bend in your knees. Just like down dog, try to lift up through the sides of your waist, your outer hips, tone your belly. So this is dolphin pose. Forearms pushing down, hips lifting up and back, head relaxed, neck relaxed. Now, for forearm balance, you'll be taking your legs up. Now, this was one of the hardest inversions that I learned. Because of this, I like to recommend people use a wall with your hands very close to the wall, maybe an inch or like 2 or 3 centimeters away from the wall. This is just because when you're doing headstand and you're gonna fall forward, if you fall forward, you tuck your chin in and roll forward. If you're doing handstand and you flip over, you're landing in upward facing bow, which is a pretty deep back bend, but if you're warmed up, you should be okay. If you're doing this and you flip over, you're landing in a very, very deep back bend that you are likely not warmed up or prepared to just flop into. So if you're practicing without a wall, I recommend kicking out to one side. Otherwise, when you're first learning, it's very helpful to go up against the wall so that you don't flip over into a back bend you're not prepared for. With that being said, once you feel confident in your dolphin pose, one of my favorite drills I like to do to prepare my body for forearm balance is what I call dolphin push-ups. Sliding your nose towards your thumbs and pressing back up. Nose to thumbs and pushing back up. Do this a few times. You'll definitely start to feel it in your upper back, your lats, your rhomboids, all of those muscles you're going to need to eventually take your legs up. From here, I want to lift one leg up and hold. Try to get this for 5 breaths and then do that on the other side. Once you feel confident with that, you can take one of your legs up. I like to gaze forward as I do this drill just because it's a little bit less disorienting than gazing back at my foot. I'm going to look forward at my thumbs and take tiny little hops. At first, the hops will be small. Eventually, I'll feel some hang time. Now, if I'm facing a wall, this front foot that I'm wiggling will be able to touch the wall so I can find some stability. Starting with split legs is going to be my best option for you, just because then your legs are like a seesaw and you can kind of counterbalance yourself. Taking both legs straight up is definitely the most challenging, because you're in a bit of a back bend, but you're trying to pull your ribs in. Eventually, you want to take your gaze back. That's definitely very challenging for me, at least. I mean, just think about down dog. The first time you did it, having your perspective flipped, it's a little bit challenging. It feels weird. So same idea here. I feel more stable when I'm looking at my thumbs, but eventually, yes, the goal is to drop your gaze back so your neck is neutral. You're just pushing into the floor. Your head is not touching the mat here. So my few tips for this, once again, are face the wall, start with really small hops, gaze at your thumbs, and what was the third? The third was start with split legs, or the fourth was start with split legs. Split legs, again, think of that like a seesaw. If you feel you're going too far one direction, you use your other leg to counterbalance. When both of your legs are straight up, just like in headstand, you feel a little bit more wobbly, especially at first. This is a full body pose. You're obviously using your upper body, but you have to engage your core, your back, your glutes, your quads, calves, literally everything in your body to stay stable and straight up in a line, which is what makes it super, super challenging. Starting with the wall, you'll gradually work your way away from the wall as you get comfortable with that foot resting on the wall. Then you can get into more of that split leg shape until maybe you are 1 or 2 feet away from the wall. And then your legs, you can confidently split your legs. Once you get to that point, you can take this pose away from the wall. You might want to have a spotter who you trust to hold your legs up if you feel you're going too far, or at least make sure you have a lot of space around you so that if you kick out to the side, you're not hitting your foot on something. Those are my tips for Dolphin pose, Ardha Pincha Mayurasana, and Forearm balance Pincha Mayurasana. Again, very challenging poses. Even Dolphin pose is very unique and challenging. There's not a lot of poses we do on our forearms in yoga, so it can feel really unfamiliar. If you have any other tips or tricks that really helped you learn these poses, let me know and help someone else out in the comments. I'll see you guys next week for episode 48.